Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Zapp Comics Radio Podcast. We had a little bit of a hiatus because my son was born a little early. So
no excuses.
He's healthy, but he wasn't on schedule. So I'm all about schedules, and he kind of threw a wrench in that. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, he's already acting up, huh, Corey?
That's just like his Uncle Ryan.
He's already tossing wrenches.
But I got two of my good buds here. Dave, and it's been a while since you've been on one, Dave. I know our schedules aren't lining up correctly. So Dave Potosnak's here from Zapp Talk fame. What's up, kid?
What's going on? You got to call my people. We'll figure it out.
And from Massachusetts, my good buddy Ryan Ratchet is here.
How are you, Corey? Are you getting enough sleep?
No, I'm not actually, but it's okay. It's all right. Sleep's overrated anyways.
I disagree.
So Ryan is my age. We born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s, and remember the entire decade of the 90s. And Dave is born in
the 80s.
Were you born in the 80s? What, 88?
Yeah.
Oh,
late. And then I was remembering stuff from 90s on.
Okay, so
it was a party.
Dave's a 90s kid. What was big in the 90s? Spawn. Okay, Spawn, MacFarlane, of course. Ryan and myself remember MacFarlane when he was on Spider-Man. I remember when Spider-Man 1 came out. I don't really remember much about 300 because I wasn't in the comics at the time, but I remember, I knew exactly who he was right before number 1 came out, and then when Spider-Man came out, it was huge. And then of course the birth of Image, and with Spawn and Youngblood, and
I know. We were there for it all.
Yes, we actually helped ruin the industry ourselves, but that's fine.
Way to go, jerks.
But it's funny how, back then it was all about art and flash and style, and now it's like 98% writing. So it's very different how the market was for books. So now, like, the new generation might, they look at MacFarlane, they know him mostly because of the toys, whether it's sports picks or, of course, Walking Dead. But when we were younger, obviously, MacFarlane was like the top artist. As far as he might not have been the best artist, but he's the most popular artist.
I think.
I remember him starting with the Incredible Hulk. I mean, he made that book a top seller before anybody else could, and his images on the Incredible Hulk were amazing. Just the covers themselves, and then of course that's what led to the Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, well, it was all flash. I mean, listen, it was very distinct, very different. I look back at it, I love it because I remember what it is, but I can see how people might not like it because it's not traditional, but at the time it was very groundbreaking, and it was really like hip, and it was really like new.
Well, that's why even now.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, even when you look at you're saying it was very artist driven in the 90s. It's very Ritter. Wow, I'm doing awesome. Sorry, John Ritter. Rest in peace. But it's the art then. It wasn't who was the best artist. I think it was who's the of the times the most 90s artist. If you could be slapped onto a tie-dye T-shirt and it looks awesome, then I feel like you were number one. I mean, look at Liefeld, look at MacFarlane. They were very stylized, but they were very of the time. Where now there's a lot of different things going on, but. Well,
but it's also you guys say 90s, but at the time it wasn't 90s. It was they were MacFarlane was trying to do something a little.
No, but when I'm saying 90s, meaning like Spider-Man came out in 90, Spawn was 91, 92. It was the end of the 80s when the 90s was coming about. It didn't look 80s. You know what I mean? Like 80s was kind of going away. It was a new. I know it was technically in the 80s, but it would flourished in the 90s.
Right, but they weren't trying to do what I'm saying is they weren't trying to do a certain decade to make their
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when you talk about this stuff and you look back, it has a very 90s feel to it. You know what I mean? It's like Seinfeld. Even though Seinfeld came out in the late 80s, it was a 90s show. You know what I mean? It's a 90s thing. I'm not saying, oh, this is 90s. I mean, it has that 90s nostalgia to it.
And I think it's just that they wanted to do something different.
Oh, which is great. It's awesome. I compare it to the Simonson Thor, which when I was younger I didn't appreciate because I thought I didn't like how it looked. It looked too different to me. Now I love it because it it has that same mold to it, where they broke it and they just kind of tweaked it and put it out. And it was very different, and it was and I love it. I absolutely positively love it. When I was younger, I didn't like it at all.
And I know, like, everybody kind of, and you know, knowing that they're both always lumped together, Liefeld and McFarlane. But I got to tell you, McFarlane has talent where, like, he didn't just create, you know, images of the characters fighting each other. McFarlane, when you look at his artwork, the scapes that backgrounds are amazing.
Oh no, McFarlane is awesome. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying it's kind of like music. You know, it just was the style at the time. And McFarlane really just it changed everything with his style, especially with Spider-Man, with the spiderwebs alone, and Spider-Man the way he was all distorted and upside down, and his elbows are sticking out. Like it was very, because Spider-Man was very, you know, with Ditko and Romita Sr. and Romita Jr. It was very, you know, very clean, especially Amazing Spider-Man. It was very clean, and when McFarlane came in, it was kind of like, whoa, what is this? And he was young, you know, they were, you knew who they were. You know, I know he was almost a Major League Baseball player or a professional baseball player until he got hurt. And he just kind of came out of nowhere, and he did a couple of things for DC, you know, Batman obviously, and then Hulk. And Spider-Man, it really took off. 300 came out, you know, with Venom, and, you know, it just changed everything, and it was so big. It was so big so fast.
And I think...
What was the first issue that you noticed him, Corey?
I remember picking up Spider-Man, like, you know, early 300s. You know, like his run there, like, I don't know what number it was, 306, 307-ish. I remember seeing it, and I remember it was, you know, the eyes on his costume were different. His name is a very cool name. The way he wrote his name was very cool. Yeah. Like his signature, and you knew it was him. Like it stood out. Where years before, you know, as much as I love that stuff, like Buscema and Romita and stuff like that, sometimes you have to really look at it to see who it was, because it was almost perfect, but a lot of it was very similar, not in a bad way. It just this is how it was. But McFarlane, like, you can look at any panel, any page, and know it's him instantly.
And it's not even saying like all the 90s art is the same.
No.
It's just saying there was things that people were doing that were different. Like comic art had balls then. Like everything was just hyper everything.
Yes,
and everyone did something.
And, you know, big X logos on there.
So everything was crazy, but the craziness that Todd McFarlane brought and his style was one of the ones doing it the best.
And here's a great thing. You know, you're mentioning just Flash over, you know, the substance. When he was on Incredible Hulk, there was both.
I'm talking about the Flash of something with Image.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm just saying, like, you know, everything was working really well when he first came out there, when he was working with Peter David on the Incredible Hulk, and then who's it? The writer of the Amazing Spider-Man.
David Michelin.
Yeah, Michelin. Yeah. And I mean, the symbiosis that they had was amazing. That was fantastic.
No, I know. And when McFarlane wrote and drew Spider-Man when he went on there. And then which is when it changed a little bit.
Right, and when they gave him his own title, when the artists started to overshadow the writing, and they started getting an ego where they were like, you know what, we're getting bored having to deal with all these writers and having to be told what to do. I think I want to do my own thing. And so, Marvel they were desperate to keep these guys who were selling humongous amounts of books, so they started just giving them titles.
Yeah, listen, that's what you do. You got to your top draw, your top talent. You got to take care of them. It's like an athlete. Sometimes you have to overpay for these guys to keep them in. That's what they were doing. And when they left, you know, Lee and McFarlane, all them. I remember when McFarlane left Spider-Man to go to Image, he was getting paid like $1 million a year, which at that time was like ridiculous.
Yeah.
But he was looking at the numbers. He's like, listen, if you look at the sales numbers compared to what I'm doing, it still wasn't anywhere near enough. But, you know, at that time, the comic market was so big, money was just getting thrown at them. You know, like, they'll sell millions upon millions of books. It didn't matter. You know, they're like, this is nothing. Like, And it was just the print runs on those books is insane.
And if you actually read any interviews with the guys back then, all the Marvel higher ups knew that this bubble was going to burst.
Oh yeah, they didn't care. That's why they did. That's why that's why it crashed. They almost purposely crashed it.
They were just pumping out as much as they could at the time where they were like, listen, we got to capitalize this on as much as we can. And what was the number one? There was a number one that they said sold only 500,000, and they were like, that's it, guys, bubble's done. And it was somebody like, I think it was like Silver Sable number one. It was like Silver Sable number one only sold 500,000, and everybody at Marvel was like, guys, we're done. Everybody, we need to really now refocus because we're not selling millions of copies anymore. And everybody's like, yeah, but it's Silver Sable number one. And they're like, it doesn't matter. It's a number one in like this time. They always sold millions. Everything.
Oh yeah, no, it was like, I remember when New Mutants 100 came out to finish off the series and kick off X-Force, and X-Men number 1 came out with, was it 8 million copies, whatever it is, the record. I mean, Spawn 1, I think, still has the record for highest independent, which is like 1.7 million copies.
Wow. Of
a brand new company. Youngblood came out first, but that was under the Malibu, it was still under Malibu at the time before it actually officially kind of became Image, and then, I think Spawn and Savage Dragon came out next, but it's like, Spawn was, like one of his wasn't like a high school creation he made, like in the 80s, and he just brought it back?
Yeah, and he wanted to, his original interviews about Spawn, he mentioned he wants Spawn to be as big as Superman. He wants every housewife to know Spawn's name. That was his original hope for this comic book.
Hey, I would hope for that too.
Yeah, unfortunately, the origins are very different.
Well, not just that, it's just that though, but also the movie kind of, didn't do what it was supposed to do.
John Leguizamo's wife knows the name of Spawn.
No, because Spawn, if you think about it, Spawn at a time was considered the number 1 selling book in the world because, like, with all the main title and the miniseries, it pretty much outsold everything. It wasn't a huge time, but, like, I think it was 92, 93, it was, like, the top selling book. Yeah, 92. So, the movie came out, 97? Ish.
I want to say yeah.
And it did okay. They thought it was going to kick off this whole franchise. I thought it did too. I remember the buzz around it, but it didn't do what it was supposed to do. I don't know if it was just, it just was executed incorrectly. I saw it once in the theater. I don't remember much of it. But did you ever see it?
Yeah, I own it on DVD.
Did you see it in the theater, or were you too young?
I don't think I saw. I don't think I can get anyone to bring me to that crap. Because you looked at, didn't it win awards or something for the CG, the cape?
I don't know. I don't remember.
It was groundbreaking technology at the time. But you know what's amazing? All right, so the movie is, for me anyways, unwatchable. But the HBO series that he brought up.
Oh, that was great.
That is amazing.
No, it was like MacFarlane, people, I know he kind of got, when they bought the baseballs, people kind of were like, oh, listen, he was on top of the world at the time, and that at that time was the hottest thing in the world, was the home run records. It was before they officially said it was tainted, but like he was like a rock star. Like he was on Good Morning America and all those talk shows. Like you knew who Todd McFarlane was. Like he had a toy company. He created Spawn. He was everywhere. He was he owned the Edmonton Oilers, a part owner for them for a while. Like he was
living the dream.
He was living the dream. Like he was like a rock star in our world. He literally was. I mean, he still is. MacFarlane is still a very powerful name, even though Spawn does not sell like it should. But MacFarlane still is. What's that?
You remember when Wizard did the top 100 powerful people in MacFarlane?
No, I know. He was. He was like, he still is to a point. I mean, I think MacFarlane's problem, what I can see, I don't know, who knows if I'm correct, but is that I think he has that Michael Jordan thing where Jordan's the owner. And who's going to say no to Michael Jordan? But he's not a super smart businessman. So, I mean, he's obviously very successful, but who's going to say no to him when he's drafting a player? You're going to say, yo, Mike, don't draft him. It's Michael Jordan. So
be like, I'm on your shoe.
You're surrounded by yes men, and I think MacFarlane falls into that same type of place where it's Todd McFarlane, you know, and he doesn't really fail at things. So when in his business model, which I don't think is correct. I mean, obviously he has a successful company, but a lot of his stuff he kind of passed on. You know, and NECA kind of took over. I think he should have held on to. I know he bought a lot of licenses and he never used, and you know, Walking Dead obviously saved him with the toys. And I'm not saying saved him, but like the sports picks are gone, but he saved the sports picks. So I'm not knocking. I'm just saying like I think he could be better off if you had guys around him that weren't yes men, which happens.
Well, I think he forgot the reason why his star, you know, exploded, which was he was a really original, you know, look, you know, and I'll say original voice, even though he wasn't really the writer for what he was noticed for. He was an original voice for comics because his illustrations, you know, blew everybody away. Not only did they blow everybody away, but people, like the editors started being, can you draw more like, you know, like MacFarlane? Like every artist started doing.
Oh yeah, no, it looked like that. Like there was a lot of when I file, we get all these books and we buy, you know, thousands of books, and you go through the titles that you forget about, like that we'll never file in the bins or quarter books forever, and you see them and they look like a bad version of MacFarlane art, but that's what they wanted. They said make it look like that, and that's what they did. Dave, when you came in, like your art when you came in wasn't good.
No.
When you came into comics, it wasn't good.
Oh no.
Because it was spread too thin. There was a lot of copycats. You know, like your generation. I think that's why you guys really went to like readers. You know, like the stories, because the art was kind of gone. You know?
I mean, it was hit or miss. I mean, there's always been the people that have been consistent throughout the years.
Oh yeah.
But I think a lot of times it's just kind of, well, the whole market just kind of tightened up.
Because art doesn't sell books anymore. Like there's a few Jim Lee, you know,
Ross covers.
Yeah, Alex Ross covers. But you used to buy all the art books. Now it's like, oh, Matt Fraction's new book's coming out, I'm gonna buy it. You didn't hear that. I mean, you had loyal readers and followers. I'm not saying they didn't, but like back then it was art. You went after all these artists' book, you know. And you look in the price guide, all the art books were higher price, like the first MacFarlane issue of Batman or Spider-Man, and you know when Liefeld, you know, first did New Mutants and stuff like that. Those books are higher priced than others, you know. But your generation is the reader generation.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not a knock. It's actually a good thing because I think the market's stronger now, even though the numbers aren't as high, because you have more. You guys are actually reading the books. Where my generation, and I'm guilty of it, I didn't read half the books I bought. I just bought them because they were posters put into a book form.
See, no one told me that because I bought them to read them.
Yeah.
So I read all of Gambit and the Externals. And
you were the one?
And it was bad.
But you read it.
I did.
I bought all those miniseries. I didn't read any of them.
Really?
I read like 10% of my books.
Revisit Gambit and the Externals.
No,
It'll be all your
I'll
favorites.
Never...
There's Gambit,
no.
the team of Strong Guy, Gambit, Jubilee,
awful,
and Sunspot.
That's just
it's like Age of Apocalypse, but like all they do is just I don't know.
That's like just awfulness.
Run around for scraps.
That's bad. That's bad.
One of the artists, early '90s artists. Actually, I was going to mention too. Just you know, it was so bad with copycat artists that they actually told the heroes of yesteryear, the artists that actually like made the industry, people like Herb Trimp, to change his style to be more like, you know, the modern artists. And there's an issue, and I can't remember which title it was, but it's Doc Ock, and he's standing on top of a whole bunch of heroes, and it's that time Trimp, and he just there's like lines everywhere for no reason. And when I look at MacFarlane, I know that there's a lot of detail to it, but the lines don't seem there erroneously, you know. There seems to be like a purpose to everything that he was doing, where this was just, you know, you could tell this was not Trimp's style. He was being told to kind of like change up his style to be more modern, and it just didn't work.
Well, but that's the thing. It was just an industry where they were just trying to keep up with the times, and you know, it's like a salesman that's been selling for 30 years, and now all of a sudden he has to get like a, you know, a POS system and like show slides and use a smartphone. And he's like, no, I just go there and I just sell to them. And it's like, no, we don't do that anymore. Everything's instant. Social media, they have to adapt. And in a way, that's kind of was like that. They're like, no, we need this, even though they didn't need that, but they were using it like that. I mean, like you're old school, you need to become new school instead of. But I think that's why like I appreciate like Trimpy and all this other stuff's art so much more now than I did when I was younger, because it's so beautiful and it's timeless. Like you can look at that, and unless the character's wearing a certain hairstyle or clothing, it looks like it could exist any time.
Yeah. Because the issue that I was talking about is Guardians of the Galaxy number 28. All right, so everybody should go and try to find this book and take a look at it just to see what I'm saying. His Trimp's style was so amazing and so timeless when he was on The Incredible Hulk. Like, you look back at it now, and it's still beautiful. But then, at that time, I mean, the art was just, everybody was trying to figure out what McFarlane did naturally.
Yeah, that's just his style, and they just should, and I think that's why it still holds up today. Because even though they're not expensive, every time we check the bins to fill back issues in, the MacFarlane Spideys are always the first ones we check. Because they always sell, and they're not rare. There's millions of them.
And the early Spawn too. Like I heard.
First 10 issues of Spawn, they're very cheap, but they always sell.
Speaking of Spawn.
Yeah, this podcast is supposed to be about Spawn.
Who?
You can't really talk about Spawn without.
Oh, I know. I'm just joking.
MacFarlane, because I mean, everything that happened. I mean, even the ramifications of today, where people always talk about, they don't want to see many more reboots and things like that. All of that stuff started with the MacFarlane Revolution. I mean, Spider-Man selling 7 million copies.
That was X-Men.
And then was it X-Men? How much?
X-Men blew Spider-Man. It was X-Men was the biggest one. Spider-Man did well. Right. I don't know how many copies it was. Might have been 3 or 4 million, but still, it's very impressive.
And then with them selling that many copies, but then they also noticed that it was the number ones. When Image came out and all their number ones sold through the roof, that's kind of where everything started.
And the thing that's even more impressive, and Dave's generation realizes this, is that Dave's generations, it's all variant covers. We didn't really have variant covers. We had a handful of them. Every book has variant covers. Spawn number 1 sold 1.7 million copies with one cover. There was no 1 in 100 incentive.
Right.
There was no anything. I mean, it was just. I mean, it was still Ben, who's another owner here of Zapp. He was in the business long before me. He remembers going to shows in like 92, 93, and you could buy cases of Spawn 1. Like, he'd go in there, and the guy had like 40 cases of Spawn number 1. You could buy them by the case, and by the end of the convention, they were all gone. You bought books by the case. Now,
that's amazing.
Now, Dave works with me. We don't. How often do we get a case of books? Maybe Secret Wars 1?
Star Wars,
that's it, but it's rare. Like, you don't ever order a case of something.
It's number 1s, and it's something big.
Yeah. Can you imagine somebody coming in here and say, can I have a case of, like, Spawn 227?
No, never.
No,
never, ever. Like, actually, I don't know.
It doesn't happen, but you
did. Happen.
You did, you bought multiples of them.
I have to say, Spawn, out of all the books that Image released, Spawn, and I would put Savage Dragon sort of in the same category, but they both had an immediate direction, and they both had not only the art that was going for it, but the story was really intriguing, which is why I think it outlasted pretty much every other book out there. Spawn and Savage Dragon actually have creators behind it who cared about creating a lasting hero.
Well, the other thing, too, is I give credit to Eric Larson and MacFarlane, is they want these characters. I think some of the other guys just kind of like, okay, I released a couple issues, I made a ton of money, and then they got lazy and distracted and did other things. Because a lot of the issues were very delayed. They were very sporadic, and it took forever for one issue to come out, and it would sell tons of copies, where Spawn and Savage Dragon just consistently came out every month. Because I think they generally care. Like, Spawn, and I'm not knocking it, does not sell anymore. There was a while it wasn't even in the top 3. It wasn't even in the top 300 Diamond books. I think it's back in there, but but it comes out because he wants it to come out. I know he's it's tongue in cheek saying he wants to break the record for longest independent book, which is Cerebus at 300. So he wants at least 301. But like he's able to do that though. He's able to release this book, and I know Savage Dragon comes out because Eric Larson wants it to come out. I don't know if he makes money off it. He just wants it to come out. We sell 1 or 2 copies to reservists here, but you know what? They buy it every month. You know, I don't put it on the shelf because we don't need it. But like, you know, it's just the fact that book's still around and there's fans for it. Like, have you ever read Savage Dragon at all, or no? Well, you Spawn.
1 or 2. I was mostly Spawn.
Okay.
Savage Dragon, if it like showed up in a stack that I had, then I would read it.
Now,
but...
when did you obviously weren't around when Spawn 1 came out? You were too young. You were like 4.
Yeah, I was still going to comic shops and stuff.
No, but when did you? What brought you into Spawn? What brought you into Spawn?
The toys.
Oh, the toys brought you.
So the toys. What brought me into Spawn comics originally is would have a friend, and then he'd get a Spawn figure, and pre Marvel Legends and stuff. They would slap a comic in there in the back. So we'd read those kind of like ridiculous Spawn comics where it'd be like, wow, Spawn's cool, but that comic is basically like, hey, it's me, medieval Spawn in the city fighting like Gold Violator. What's coming? Oh, the vehicles, which are also available for purchase. And I was like, well, this is awesome. I need to figure out where it's coming from.
How old were you? Like 7, 8.
It was elementary school. I remember this was probably like 3rd or 4th grade, something like that, and it was the coolest thing ever. I remember my cousin had the Spawn car, which completely ridiculous.
Yeah, I remember that thing.
I mean, those toys made me want to read the comic, and then I finally got around to reading the comic, and it's just, you know, it's just serial killer, pedophile, ice cream men getting their due. And
so where did you start with number 1, or did you start with what was out on the racks now?
Number 1.
Oh, when you bought them, you started with number 1?
I think I started with number 1. I remember like borrowing them from friends and stuff like that, and then it was kind of whatever you can get your hands on at that point.
So you didn't read them, you know, in order then?
I did later. I like revisited them much later. Actually, what got me back into comics around the time of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, all the Joan Vasco stuff, that brought me back to Spawn. And then
was that like 2000?
Around there, yeah. Okay. So around like 2000. 2001 probably. That's when I went back, revisited them, and just started reading all the way through. I had a friend whose older brother just would have the entire runs. I think was eBay early 2000. That was much Once eBay like started and was getting big, he realized, hey, I can buy every Spawn comic. I can buy every MacFarlane Spider-Man. So he just had long boxes, and that was the coolest thing. Like,
I used to read
Spawn.
Out of nowhere. I bought the first like 10 or 12 issues of Spawn because that's what I bought everything at the time, you know, all those Image books, and but later on, Ryan you bought like the first 200 issues, I think. I remember being at your house and reading Spawn, like on your couch. I would read the issues. I remember just to get caught up.
Let's start with issue number 1, right? Issue number 1 has a great, origin story. It has some real big, cool intrigue, but it also begins with setting Spawn up as this anti-hero who used to be a man. You could tell he was a man, and then they also set it up that I think this is in number 1, right? He's set up as an African American. So you get all these little pieces. He used to have a wife.
I don't remember. Did they tell you it was Al Simmons right off the bat, or did they later on tell you it was Al Simmons?
They didn't tell you it was Al Simmons. They just said, or at least from my memory, they didn't say his name was Al Simmons yet. But you knew he had a wife, and you knew that he died, and that he didn't know how he got there, but now he has these weird powers, and that he, was in hell and then brought back to Earth. But you didn't know anything else. I mean, as far as origin comics go, and I read them all. I read Wildcats. I read Youngblood. I read Savage Dragon. I mean, as far as they go, this was, far and away the best, book to anticipate. Like, even those first 4, where the Violator finally came out and they had that big battle, and he ripped a hole through the Violator that was like, watermelon sized, and the Violator's just standing there.
No, I remember it was brutal. I remember, like, it was great. The splash pages were gorgeous. Yeah. I mean, listen, the guy knows what he's doing, and he did it right.
And
but it was graphic and it was funny at the same time. He rips out Spawn's heart, and then Spawn gets up, and he's just like, "You want to try that again?" And Violator's like, "He doesn't need a heart. He doesn't need a heart." And then he gets angry, and he's like, "What the hell? He doesn't need a heart?"
So what drew you in with it? Was it his costume? Was it?
I think I was just about to say, when it comes to the whole Spawn universe, everything, like the style of every single character, like Spawn, that's a great costume.
Oh, it's beautiful. Listen, I don't like Deadpool at all. Deadpool's got a great costume. Spawn, I'm not a huge fan on. I appreciate him. He's got a great costume.
And I like that Todd McFarlane, with the times, as the comic changes, as the story changes, even as kind of his business changes, he would update the costume. So I really like the classic Spawn. I like the red under the lines. Has more of like a classic, I'd say, kind of a Marvel feel, of like a more classic hero.
Yeah, it had a very Marvel feel. So even though he had Batman, aftertaste to it, it was definitely felt like Marvel.
And then after a while, he just kind of left, and it'd be like the new look of Spawn, and he would just have like a nice like goalie hockey pad full of spikes, or his foot would just be like a giant tube with spikes on it, and it was awesome. Like he got rid of the red, he would change the lines up a little bit, and then as like the series went on into like the mid 2000s to late 2000s, it really changed. Ryan, you still there? We're back.
Now I am.
Sorry about that.
He just kind of kept it going to the part where I remember reading some Spawn comics later on where Spawn wasn't even really present. He was just kind of this, like, he haunted the area in the book. Like, he would show up outside of it. And that's why books like Sam and Twitch, where they were able to even take a look at these extra characters, were awesome.
No, right. I remember Sam and Twitch kind of overshadowed him for a little while. Sam and Twitch has still to this day has a big following. You know, they're a very loyal following, and I think when all dust settles with all these superhero stuff, movies and shows coming out, if they can really nail a Sam and Twitch show, I think it'll be awesome.
Well, I think Spawn 2 was supposed to be a Sam and Twitch cop story.
Okay.
Which was going to be like, what's going on? Seems like crazy, spooky stuff, and then it was Spawn. So, but I mean, it would work. I mean, it would work better if they can. Oh, I pray they can get John Leguizamo back though. But
see, I don't remember the movie enough to know. I don't remember. I remember scenes from it, but I don't remember.
He was the perfect clown.
Yeah. It was ridiculous. It was out of control. But I mean, Spawn, how they wrapped up the series too with Al Simmons, which we know Al Simmons is back now.
Oh, he's back?
He's back.
Okay.
They brought him back. Ryan, did you read, what was it? It was Image, it was the big crossover.
The Image United.
Image United. And you were talking about that before. What did they do with him? I know I just read 250 where he came back.
They never finished Image United. That series never finished.
Image United was supposed to be, a 6-issue series, and it only came out with the first 4, is that right?
3 or 4. One, I remember one, we ordered 1 billion copies of it, and it never sold, and by the time issue 3 came out, we literally ordered 4.
Yeah, it was, I feel like it's a little bit too bad just because to pull something like that off took a lot of work.
Yeah, and a lot of money, I think, too.
And people just, the readers just weren't there. They weren't interested, unfortunately. But at that point, I know that all the Image heroes wanted to fight Al Simmons, who was now like the new Malboja.
Which is a cool idea.
Yeah, I didn't read too much of it, and like I said, I guess it doesn't matter because it didn't even finish. But you said now Spawn is back in the book?
Spawn's back in the book. They ended him, so the storyline of Spawn, I guess we never really talked about it. We just said it's a man, he was a mercenary, hired killer. He basically, in some way, sold his soul. There we go. Got some Malboja up on the screen.
That Malboja MacFarlane figure, I remember was like... It was like an $80, $100 figure. It was nuts. Everybody wanted it. That was like one of the first figures I remember people going nuts for. Because only one per case, because it's too big, and the bubble would crack, and the pack. It should be in a box, it's on a card.
I I got this for like $5.
Well, that's the thing. Now you can get. It's why they always sell when we get them, because we sell them cheap. Because it's like, oh my god, I remember that when I was a kid. It was like $80. Now you can get it for $5.
But all right, so like the
wait.
So the story. So then it's basically a redemption story, where he is supposed to be basically the general of Hell's armies to come up to Earth and kind of, he's supposed to be King Bad Guy in a way. He's working for Malbolgia, and he's the one who stands up and he's like, you know what? You gave me these powers. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do my own thing. And then it's kind of all of the other demons, all the other people, all the other players just kind of show up and show themselves to him over these issues. And
no, did Malbolgia powered him?
It's, I mean...
What was his purpose?
Basically, yeah.
What was his purpose? Did they ever say what his purpose was?
Yes. He was supposed to, and this is why he started, those first issues where people would come to him and then they would fight and he would kill them. He was actually building Malbolgia's army to fight against God.
Oh, so when he would kill someone, they'd go to Malbolgia.
Yes, like the souls would go to Malbolgia. So when he killed Billy Kincaid, and Spawn's thinking he's doing the right thing because he's killing this child molesting psychopath. When he's killing him, he's thinking, all right, so he deserves this. But in essence, he was making Malbolgia stronger. So that's why that big clash happened between him and Malbolgia, because he wasn't going to do it anymore.
Oh, okay. All right, that's actually kind of neat. I didn't know that.
And the end of his storyline, when they officially... Oh, well, people know. I don't say spoiler. It happened forever ago. When Al Simmons dies, when they're like, we're going to have a new Spawn. Obviously, he's
was
back.
That in game?
Yeah.
Okay.
He blows his own head off.
I remember the
He
cover
becomes
for it.
so powerful that he's the only one that can do it. And I don't know if I want to spoil it, but the story at the end, it basically goes back to number 1 and wraps everything up beautifully. For something to go on that long, to wrap up a character, and that just kind of surprised everybody. I know there was I was even reading Spawn on and off. I knew the apocalypse was happening. I felt like I'd read so much and waited so long for this to happen. I read it. There was there were babies that were now in charge of heaven, and it was out of control and just over the top. But the ending of the storyline where he's like, I'm a great guy, I'm doing this, I'm doing it, they kind of pull back the curtain, and it's like, Al Simmons, this is your life. It's like, we got you to think that you were doing the right thing, you brought this army, why do you think that, we've been telling you the truth the whole time? And then they go through this whole kind of big twist ending, well, it's not a big enough twist to ruin the comic. The people do that where it's like, why did I read this?
Yeah.
I've been lied to, but it just added to the story and kind of turned it into like a fable or it was really cool. So I recommend it.
But the first time you really get to notice what Malbolgia's plan was is after he killed Billy Kincaid. He kills Billy Kincaid, and then
is Billy Kincaid, which is he the
Ice Cream Man, the guy from issue 5, I believe.
Yeah.
Some issues later, and I can't remember the exact issue, but they go through the whole thing of what now Billy Kincaid goes through, and he becomes a Spawn. He becomes one of the army. But it's the thing that killed him that is now he's becoming. So he's tortured by this whole thing. It was really well written and really well done. But that's kind of when you're first clued into, wait a minute, Billy Kincaid now becomes a Spawn. And that's kind of when you're clued into the idea that Malbolgia is just having, Spawn kill all these things to create this bigger army.
Well, so when did the whole battle go down with Malbolgia?
I want to say
100 around, or a little.
I want to say it was actually closer to either 150, because I know that he decapitates Malbolgia. He cuts his head off.
So so that whole thing was 150 issues. That whole with that whole when it all fell apart, it was that long.
150 was the battle too that Angela dies. Is that right?
No, Angela was long out of the books by then. There was already a lawsuit for that.
No, because all right, so Angela appears in number 9.
Yeah, but didn't he make Tiffany to offset that?
Right. So Angela appears in number 9, and then sporadically is appearing, but because the amount of books that they're selling wasn't what it once was, he doesn't want to have to keep paying to use Angela.
Okay.
And so then he creates Tiffany, but Tiffany's not as popular. Everybody wants to see Angela. So then he starts to put Angela in and is constantly fighting with Gaiman about how much Angela is worth every time he puts her in the book and stuff, and he wants to be paid a certain amount. So then they can't agree, or they get the lawsuit, Gaiman wins, and then he's like, all right, fine, you win, I'll kill off Angela.
Okay.
So that's kind of what happened with, like, issue 150. I believe in the big battle, Spawn wins, but Angela dies.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
I think so. It's been a while, but I believe so.
Yeah.
I just remember. I mean, just the art. I just remember him turning the chains around the neck and just decapitating him. That was like awesome. That was so cool.
Well, I remember. See, here's my whole thing too. Is when Image started, they wanted to create another Marvel. They wanted to create this universe where all these heroes would kind of, collide, just like Marvel does. Marvel and DC has it right, though, where, this one corporate entity owns everything.
Yeah.
And you can use it here and there. When creators retain their rights, this is what, Image learned later on, is that when creators retain their rights, you have to not just, deal with putting these characters in the books, but you have to deal with all the personalities that go along with them. Yeah. So if a guy is angry at you, if this guy is no longer your friend, he doesn't want you to use those characters. So remember early Spawn, who killed Spawn? Who killed Al Simmons? You don't remember?
I have no idea.
Was it Cerebus?
It was Chapel from Youngblood.
Oh, I totally forgot. Yeah, the Chapel was... See, I just knew Chapel from the book. I didn't even know him from Youngblood.
Well, when did it... What issue was it that he killed him?
All right, so it was early... I believe it was in the early... It might have been the late teens to early 20s. Al Simmons learns that Chapel is the one who killed him. So he goes and he finds Chapel, and he actually... Chapel always painted his face into a skull, like, when he went into battle. And Simmons goes over and he's like, you killed me, and they kind of have this big battle, and then he just takes his face and rips off his skin and makes that skull emblem his actual face.
I remember. What was that?
Which was super cool. It was like it's almost like Inglourious Bastards when Brad Pitt carves the swastika into all the Nazi people that he leaves alive.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a permanent scar, then, pretty much.
Yeah. So he does that to Chapel. He makes Chapel just a skull face.
Why did Chapel kill him?
He was under orders. Mm-hmm. It was
it was a military thing?
Yeah, it was Wynn. It was Jason Wynn gave the order to Chapel to kill him. But again, and Dave, this is what I was talking about. You have all these creators. So who owned Youngblood? That was Liefeld.
Yeah.
But Liefeld, unfortunately, was not following the business plan that everybody else wanted to follow for Image. So they kicked Liefeld out. And so MacFarlane couldn't use Chapel anymore. So he was like, all right, I got to find this new person who killed him. So back in the issues 40s or 50s, it became Jessica Priest who killed him.
Oh, so they changed it.
Yeah.
How did they explain it?
They do explain it, but it was really not my favorite. let's say it seemed forced, and it came off that way too.
I feel like later Spawn, from what I remember, they had to do a lot of backtracking.
Yeah.
Where it's in the beginning it was so concise, but I imagine if you're going for over 300, that's going to happen.
Yeah, of course it does. Any character has done that.
And then even the whole Jason Wynn and stuff, I don't even know if they got to it. I just remember when the new Spawn showed up, they kind of did the same thing where it's all about this one guy who finally wakes up. Once Spawn dies, a light shines into the heavens and nobody knows what's going on, but at the same point that the lights showed up and it was on the news, some guy wakes up. And then all these people are receiving phone calls. And I don't know if it's some CEO or the president or something, and he gets a call. He's like, "Sir, he's woken up." And he's like, "Okay." And he pulls a gun out of his desk and shoots himself in the head. It's just It was so over the top, and that's kind of what Spawn became for a little bit. And they wanted...
Was MacFarlane still writing it?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think for a little while, Spawn was doing so well that MacFarlane was just like, people like Spawn again? Move over. And he like hopped on, and then for a while, every now and then, like, there'd be like a big splash page that he did, and that was awesome. So you'd read the story, and then it would just be, boom. Like, he'd do a cover, he'd do that. And then I think around the end game, he was really, really closely tied into that. But,
well, first of all, when he gave the drawing responsibilities over to Capello, I think that was like its biggest hurdle, because you were buying the book from MacFarlane.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, he gives the artist's duties over to Capello, and Capello actually, to his credit, really kind of grew into that spot where everybody now associated Capello with Spawn. And then I remember MacFarlane gave over the writing duties to somebody else, and for a while it was other people kind of telling the stories of Spawn. And then it came out that MacFarlane was using a pen name for years. He was writing Spawn, but he didn't put his name on it because he didn't want, I guess at that time it was like the stigma of the fact that a lot of people didn't like certain runs because the writing to them wasn't as strong.
Huh.
Well, I know it was like 50 issues, right? I think he did with a different name or something like that.
Yeah, there was ones where he was doing them under a pen name because he didn't want that stigma, and then all of a sudden he's like, hey guys, everybody's been talking about how good Spawn is lately. Hey, guess who's been writing it? Actually, it's me.
No, it's cool because like his name is what sold the book, but at the same time, it might have hurt the book. So he tried to, because you know what? It's like the Jim Lee effect. Jim Lee is one of the main guys running DC, so he can't keep up with a monthly title. Everybody's like, why doesn't Jim Lee draw anymore? Because he's running the company. He can't sit down and do a 24-page book. That's why they do the event books or the covers or variant covers. Because they just can't, like Quesada, he barely does anything now because he's too busy doing the Marvel stuff.
Right.
MacFarlane's the same way. He has a book going out. He has a toy company. He's got so many other things going on. It's hard for him to just sit down. Okay, I'm gonna, start drawing again. It's not that easy.
And not only that, but you have to, there's a certain point where it separates. Like, what's your favorite Spider-Man story?
Mine?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But just guess, and what's the percentage that it's a Stan Lee story?
Oh, it's probably not.
I mean, my favorite Spawn storyline, I always talk about it, and for some reason we never have it. I don't know if they just didn't print a lot. It's right after, so the apocalypse happens, blah, blah, blah. This isn't the full ending, but basically heaven and hell turn Earth into just a battlefield wasteland. And Spawn, because he's so powerful, recreates the Earth. And everyone's nice and happy, but this is an Earth without a heaven or hell. So something's off, and there's like the epicenter of where the Earth was created, and something's wrong, and all the people in it, something's weird. Like, it's kind of like all these different Lovecraftian kind of old, even like House of Mystery, kind of like weird stories going on in it, and they all revolve around him. And this one girl who's seeing it all happen and writing a story, she gets down into the basement, and the basement's just chains, and it's just Spawn who is resting for those days after creating. And it was like a weird, they were like, we're giving it away to this person, they're going to do some interesting art, an interesting story, and then we'll be back to tell the story of the new world. But it was kind of like an aside, and it was awesome. And I think that really, really picked up to the point where they were able to lead into this new world. They kind of wrote themselves a brand new, well, they literally wrote themselves a brand new world, like a new universe. So they were able to bring the new Spawn, which people...
That was just all in this regular Spawn?
That was all in regular Spawn. That was all regular Spawn timeline. And then he blows his head off.
I remember that. I remember when Endgame came out, because Spawn was barely selling at the time. Yeah. Endgame came out, and I remember the first couple issues, they were worth a lot of money because you couldn't find them because the print runs were low. Because Endgame kind of... From Endgame to like issue 200, the sales were really good on Spawn. Yeah. Then it dwindled a little bit, and then he started doing the variant covers of the homage covers to like all the like ASM 316 and Savage Dragon 1 like that. They did all those, and Spider-Man 300 they did all those. Then they jumped again because everyone wanted the variant covers, and then now it kind of just leveled off again because it's just a regular book again.
And they were able to do that. Again, like, well, Cyan, her and the grandmother great characters. Like, great, there's a lot of great, like, surrounding cast.
Saying that's Elsimon's daughter, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, technically, not Al Simmons' daughter. I'm sorry, it's his wife's daughter.
Oh yeah, it's wife's daughter. Okay, that's actually
Yeah,
MacFarlane. It's named after MacFarlane's real daughter name.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they couldn't have kids. Him and Wanda couldn't have kids.
Oh, Al and Wanda couldn't have kids?
No, and so then when Terry Fitzgerald, kind of came in to console Wanda, he consoled her in such a way that they produced a child.
That's a very nice way of saying.
The science is right.
But yeah, but you know what, Dave, you're right. Like it was the story itself, the comic itself was really strong, mainly in the beginning because MacFarlane knew how to write some really great supporting characters.
It's true.
Sam and Twitch didn't just get a book because they were just like these characters in the book. They got them because they were that popular, because they were really well written.
Yeah.
And then Clown and Violator, of course, were fantastic enemies. And then
Cagliostro.
Yeah, what was he? Because I can't remember exactly. I remember he was like the leader of the homeless.
Pretty much. He was, I'm not sure if he at one point was the older Spawn or if he was from heaven. It was kind of, he was like the Obi-Wan of the early books.
He tried to lead Spawn into doing the right thing, but Spawn, of course, being who he was always going into the dark side.
Well, even like spoilers, if you don't want to know the ending, the Al Simmons ending, why he kills himself, this is it. So the coolest thing, they will go back to the beginning. We learned who he is. We have all these supporting characters that we learn to love and see what he did and how he is going to save them. Like even Grandma, she's one of like the generals in Heaven's armies in the end. And she's like, I don't want to fight. I was just like a devout like Christian my whole life. But she gets angel wings and a giant sword and she's like, what's going on? So you know that he wants to save Cyan. All he wanted to do was make sure Wanda had a great life. Everything was good. But spoilers, Al Simmons was actually a terrible, terrible dude.
Yep.
So at the end, it's just like, well, I couldn't have kids. And then they're like, no, you could have kids. And then you see him and Wanda, and he was abusive, and he kicks her down the stairs when she's pregnant and stuff. And like, he was a bad guy, and they basically, even from the very beginning, his origin, he's like, well, I care about my wife, I care about my family, I'm going to do the right thing. And they're like, no, you were awful. So you realize that this redemption story that you've been reading the whole time was even more so. To the point where they break him at the very end, but he realizes that the right thing to do is to take himself out of everybody's life. And to kind of end that where he recreated the world, they can do what they need to do. He got rid of heaven and hell, so now it's people's decisions to make up on their own because he couldn't do it. Because he messed up his own life. So it's kind of awesome.
So now, it's awesome that all sounds. Neither of you guys read the book anymore.
I tried.
Well, why is that? I know you tried. Well, Ryan, why don't you read the book anymore?
All right, so I dropped it early 200s. Well, I had pretty much dropped all the books. I wasn't reading comics for a little while. Later 100s. Like I dropped everything.
Okay, so it's not like you didn't just drop it to drop it. You kind of just lost interest in comics.
Right, and then when I came back to comics, I was focusing mostly on the Marvel superheroes that I remember loving. I didn't go back to any Image titles.
Okay, so you didn't lose. Spawn itself didn't turn you off.
No.
Okay. You just kind of, you were done with it.
When I started reading again, I was just like, what am I interested in? And Spawn just didn't happen to be on that list.
Okay, and Dave, why did you stop? I remember you shopping here,
yeah.
And I used to talk to you about Spawn all the time.
The new Spawn, when they put in the new character, it was so, like I said, like the president is just like, everyone killed themselves, the kid's awake. It took so long, and the storylines, like he met witches, it didn't catch footing at all. Like he wasn't very likable. The surrounding cast, he was just confused all the time. You're still waiting for his backstory, and you're reading like way too far into it. I was reading a lot of other things. There's a lot of great stuff going on, so just lost interest. And then 250, I was promised Brian Wood. He left.
Yeah, he left before it came up, but he's named on all the posters.
Literally, the whole book is about Sam and Twitch, who I'm like, Sam and Twitch, this is going to be great. It's about them trying to decipher bugs. The whole book is about bugs showing up and like blocking off bridges and making symbols, and them trying to build the symbols into a word.
Spawn wasn't even in it, right?
At the last page, he's like, surprise! They're like, does it spell this? Does it spell that? And then they're like, guys, like, there's rats and snakes and bats attacking people in the city. We're cops. We need to do something. They're like, no, we're trying to solve the puzzles.
See, I think Spawn is one of those books. I know. As much as I appreciate Spawn and McFarlane for wanting to keep it going, the numbering, they don't want to renumber books. In this day and age, you kind of need to renumber a book. So I think if they redid a Spawn #1 and he had like awesome guest stars doing the variant covers and kind of tweaked it, and almost in a way like how Archie tweaked the Archie book.
No, it needs a new 52.
It does need it needs a fresh look, a fresh start. Have an awesome writer come on, have McFarlane do an amazing cover, maybe even draw the first issue, and really kick it off. I think that's the only way to get Spawn kind of relevant again to the newer reader, because he's just another title, and it's just like oh yeah, I remember Spawn when I was a kid. I had one of the toys, and they don't go to pick it up, and it kind of bothers me because Spawn was so big for so long.
But the thing is too, like, it would have been a perfect time to do that after Endgame.
Oh yeah, of course.
That would have been a perfect time to do it because, basically he was writing, this epic.
But this falls back on the same thing with, he's surrounded by yes men probably, because he's so fixated on getting to issue 301 when nobody cares. Nobody knows what Cerebus is. Cerebus is everybody loves Cerebus. Everybody who reads Cerebus thinks it's the best thing ever, but it's never been a big seller. It's one of those little books that people who love it worship it, and it's writers love it, creators love it, the industry love it, but it's never been mainstream and never will be mainstream. It's not meant for the mainstream. And he's like, I'm going to get the 301. I'm going to get the first book, but nobody cares. Nobody cares if you get the 301.
I think that's a little bit of the ego coming in too. Like,
yeah,
McFarlane in his articles that he wrote, McFarlane's a big believer in, when people tell him no, he wants to do it even more.
I'm the same way, but there's a point where you got to be like, okay, well, this makes sense.
I agree, but that's kind of. Do you know that's kind of how the toy company started? And we got to talk about some of the toys because the toy company started because he went to, when Spawn was the #1 selling book, he went to Hasbro and he went to Kenner and everybody, and he was like, so what can you do for me? And they were like, well, listen, we're the biggest toy company in the world. We're one of the biggest toy companies. Who else are you going to go to? And they basically were telling him, this is how you do things. And he said, well, I really want them detailed. I really want them like this and this. And they were like, yeah, that's going to cost a lot of money. This is how you do things. And he hated hearing the words like, you should do it like this, or, you can't do it like that. So that's what kind of how he was like, you know what? What's stopping me from going and doing this myself?
Oh, no, and I appreciate that, and I like how he did that. On that end, that's correct. But on the other end, look at when they did New 52 and, they restarted Batman and Detective Comics and Action Comics, which were in the almost, Action is close to 1,000. You know what I mean? A detective just hit, the numbers were so high. How dare you do this? They do it, and it worked. It's okay to do it. So, the toy company thing, I agree 100%, 110% on. But as far as if you tell me no, I'm going to do opposite, you gotta, sometimes you have to be you can't be so stubborn and ignorant. You know what I mean? You have to be like, well, maybe this time. But I think he's just so set in his ways,
I think someone should tell him to please do not make one more really good Spawn figure, because that would sell.
There hasn't been that's the other thing. He owns a toy company. When was the last time there was a Spawn figure? The Spawn animated figure is 10 years ago.
Is it still Spawn.com, the website?
Yes.
So it's Spawn.com, but he hasn't made a Spawn for...
all he makes is Walking Dead, which is fine. That's where the money is.
Yeah.
But he should, if he made just a classic, standard, awesome Spawn figure...
Like a Marvel Legends Spawn with the plastic they use.
And have it go through Diamond, have Diamond release it. It's only to specialty shops.
Call it Gene St. Jean.
Yeah, Gene St. Jean was sculpted for him.
Yeah, and it'd be beautiful.
Well, he used to work for him.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that relationship is.
Well, we'll talk to him. Okay. Make sure everything works out. Gene St. Jean's got enough awesome stuff going on, too.
Get them back on talking terms.
It would be funny if NECA sculpted for them. That would be funny.
Well, here's the thing, too. When he brought out that toy line, the first issues, or the first series there was, I mean, of course he had a Spawn, and then he had Overkill.
Yeah.
And he had Tremor. Right?
Yep.
He had and the Violator was all plastic. It was like all rubbery plastic that you could.
It was like one of those bendums. You could kind of like bend their arms and stuff. Yeah.
And Cygor.
Yeah, Cygor.
No, the original. That wasn't.
Was
that
that
wasn't
two?
in the first series.
Yeah, no, that wasn't the first series. When was it? Was it Hamburger Head Spawn the first series?
Yeah, Hamburger Head Spawn came out in the first series as like a variant, but then bootleggers would just take like the regular figure, and I don't know how they got like hamburger heads, but they would actually open up and put the hamburger heads on the regular figure. So then there was an ultra because I think Hamburger Head had the black costume, and the regular the very first release was the blue costume, and then there was the Hamburger Head on blue costume.
No, I remember. I think issue 50. If you bought 50 issues of it, you got there was a special version of the Hamburger Head Spawn or something like that. A figure. I forget the redemption on it.
Well, there was
one.
Remember. There was the Stitch in the head on one, I think.
Yeah.
Then there was what? There was the the Necro see-through green one.
Yep, Necroplasm one.
The gold one.
No, that is 90s toy collecting summed up in one thing. Is just look at the Spawn.
They made a gold everyone.
Yeah.
The gold ones went through KB. So
yes.
Those were all special. But there was the early ones. The variants were the Overkill, who had a parking meter as his weapon.
Yes.
Had a 5 cent on it. And then all of a sudden they had a 5 and a 10 cent, and everybody went, "Ooh, guys, the 5 cent's going to be worth millions!"
No, I know, and then all of a sudden they changed because they were small, and then they made them really beefed them up. I remember with the pilot Spawn and the medieval Spawn.
Series 2, because Series 1 was all in blister packs.
Yeah, that plastic ones.
Yeah, and they were almost. I mean, I guess they were 6-inch, but Spawn itself was closer to G.I. Joe size.
Yeah, they were small.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Series 2 came out, and they were all on carded backs, and the figures were supersized.
Oh, they were huge. They were super detailed. I think what it was, he found out how to make it work, and then when he made money off of made it work, he's like, okay, now we're gonna do it our real way. Got amazing sculptors in there and put out these almost like statues on a toy package, and it took off.
I used to buy those too. The classic covers, that's where Spawn kind of fizzled out and ended. But they would just take the coolest art, the coolest covers, and then just recreate them. And
I remember the Samurai Spawn.
Awesome.
Remember the big Samurai Spawn? That thing was gorgeous.
Mandarin Spawn?
Yes. Yeah, the Mandarin Spawn, yeah.
Yeah, the Mandarin Spawn was amazing.
Because they made a 12 or 18-inch figure of that. I remember having that. I think it's beautiful.
But,
remember Wings of Redemption. That's a Gene St. Jeaner.
Is it?
Yeah.
And here's the funny thing too is all right, so with those later series, he did an Angela. Remember No Panties Angela?
No, I know. People went nuts for it. And I remember some Toys R Us or KBs took the bigger Angela off the shelf, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's gonna be worth money." I'm like, "No, it's not." But
no, it's really not. But then they did Dave's favorite Cygor. They did. They kept on bringing out, and then he started doing the figures for other books. He did Troll from
oh yeah,
Blood.
Yep.
He did Max, which was a great figure. I love that figure. But then as he went later on even more, he started just creating toy lines that had nothing to do with anything.
Yeah, because that's where the money was. That's the same model that Ninja Turtles did. They said just make something. Okay, and they did.
I remember Manga Spawn.
Yeah.
Here's a whole toy line called Total Chaos. And what are the figures from? Nothing. They're just figures that look really cool.
And they sold like crazy.
Here's Poacher. Here's a humongous elephant that kills for ivory, I believe. I think he killed his own kind. That was his whole little backstory that you could read on the page.
I want that book.
Imagine that came out. Imagine if that came out today. Oh my God, that'd be bad.
I'd buy it.
There was Hoof, right? Hoof was the rhinoceros with a with a grenade launcher on his back. Dave, can you take that part out?
Sure. What do you want to say instead of grenade?
So there was Hoof, who had a grenade launcher on his back. A rhinoceros.
No, it was. Listen, man, he said. I mean, unfortunately, he doesn't know how to. He sets it, but then he stays in it too long. I think sometimes, and he doesn't know how to keep going with it. The same thing with his book, the toy lines. Like he lets them die for some reason. I don't know why.
Hey, so
Like
Sam
sports picks, he'll
and
die.
FYE will have something for their clearance section that'll be worth
Like
money
the sports
later.
picks, he kind of let that go. Like it's barely comes out now.
Did you have a favorite toy line?
Me?
Yeah.
I remember Malbosia coming out. I remember the Max figure.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Total Chaos was really cool. The packaging was like hip. It was like new. It was flashy. They were colorful. What was that guy? He was like a grave digger guy.
Oh my god! Yeah, his name was actually Grave Digger.
Yeah, him. But he became with all those ghosts. I think. I mean, you can get bags of ghosts too.
Yeah.
Like it was neat. And you could send away for them. So I don't really have a favorite line. I just remember. I bought all the toys.
I saw you as a Twisted Land of Oz kind of guy.
Yeah, that was bad.
That super S&M Dorothy with the munchkins pulling her chains.
And then with the torture figures too were pretty bad.
Yeah, they were. Oh my god.
That was like Clive Barker, right? Clive Barker's Tortured
Souls. I think so. Yeah, Tortured Souls. Yeah, that was bad. But you know what? That's what was selling. The toys were, whether it was Spencer's or I don't know if Hot Topic was around at the time, but everywhere else.
Great. My favorite line and.
Wetworks. Remember Wetworks? Wetworks? They did the Wetworks line?
Oh my gosh, yes. The book that came out, 7 years after Image started, and then...
Yeah, it was supposed to be one of the first ones.
But my favorite toy line, and not a lot of people remember these, my friend Bill had them all and absolutely, loved them. But it was the Universal figures, the Universal monster figures, but they were MacFarlane versions of them. And they came with play sets.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
These were huge.
They were small. The figures were small, right? They were
yes,
2 inches tall, maybe 3.
But then the entire thing came with a whole a play set that you could put together.
Yeah, no, he did a great job with it. I mean, I remember having them. I remember being at Toys R Us, putting them on the shelf.
We have the Frankenstein on the wall right now.
Yeah, we still have the Frankenstein one here now, actually. So we get them in.
Those and then the Matrix. The Matrix ones I loved. The Matrix line was awesome.
Very cool.
I think we have every one of those on the shelf. Matrix. That died out. That was huge, but it kind of died out. As far as the...
No one else could have handled that license better.
Oh no, it came out great.
Yeah.
So, but no.
Okay, what's your favorite line?
My favorite line, I guess I would say I bought the most of the classic covers. Just they were unbelievable. I mean, they were basically just statues. You just put them all together. Either that or also that's why one of my favorite artists, Ashley Wood, when they did the classic covers, they made those Hellspawn covers that they did it in that style. And now I collect all the 3A figures, and thinking about it, they're up in my parents' attic somewhere. Those are basically early 3A. He really was able to take any style and start it from something like the early Spawn figures and go to something like that where, I don't know, you probably saw it, the Cygor figure, the one in the classic covers where it was literally just a stick of plastic on the bottom, but it was heavy with 2 metal rods, and it was just Spawn falling through the sky punching Cygor, and it was this huge, heavy figure. But stuff like that, no one else was doing that.
No, he even did remember he did the whole Kiss line.
Yeah.
He did the Doors. He did the Motley Crue box set, the Metallica box set. He did all this stuff.
One of my favorite things was you know how MTV did Cribs?
Yeah.
Well, they went to Matt Pinfield's apartment, and they were showing off Matt Pinfield's crib. And Matt Pinfield's going he was a huge toy collector, so he had all these figures everywhere. And he had the entire Metallica lineup on his TV, and he said, minus Lars Ulrich, and that's on purpose. And
that's awesome.
I think, actually, I forgot the Alien figures that he made.
Yeah.
I loved. And then the horror stuff.
Yeah, because he did all the Movie Maniacs. Yeah, remember Movie Maniacs?
I still wish I could find, NECA's finally making it. Jason's mother's head. Okay. But I know they did a whole sculpt of her, and they did of the altar. That, when they find her head and her sweater and power, that was awesome.
I remember that.
That's great.
The Movie Maniacs was funny. Remember the first series had Scream in it, had Jason, had Freddy, And then I think the second series had the Blair Witch from the Blair Witch Project, but the Blair Witch Project never showed what the Blair Witch looked like.
Oh, really?
So they had come up with a figure to look like the Blair Witch.
Oh, so in the movie, there's no Blair Witch? You don't see it?
No, not in the movie.
Oh, so that figure... Oh, I only know it because of the toy. I always thought that's what it was. I never saw the movie.
And then
that's
the
awesome.
Fly.
The Fly.
Some good Jeff Goldblum action. That was a cool
they did
figure.
Psycho.
I hate that it had like the little hard hairs on it. It's just creepy.
Oh.
I hated touching it.
No, MacFarlane, listen, the guy is awesome. So he did so much for this industry, and he could be around for another 50 years doing it, you know. And he's still going strong. He's still hungry, which I love about MacFarlane. He's still hungry.
I wonder where he'd land on the comics power player list now.
Now, unfortunately, not. I think Kirkman is a lot higher than him in image, but he's still relevant. It's just not. I don't think he doesn't have the pull he used to have. You know, I don't know. I don't think he tries. I think he just does his own thing. You know, I don't think he cares if he's powerful because the industry's changed a lot.
Well, you know what? I'm thinking let's wait.
But he started it though.
Let's wait another 50 issues.
You know, MacFarlane started this. You know, he was like the first free agent almost, if you think about it.
But everything that MacFarlane did had a lasting impression on the comic industry.
Oh yeah.
And today.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have what we have today without MacFarlane being there.
No, if you remember too, MacFarlane was that the first 209 to do Build-A-Figures? Remember those robots all went together?
Yep.
That's Marvel Legends, you know, copied that, you know, and you get, you know, obviously NECA all came out of MacFarlane, and they have all the movie stuff now.
Spawned it all off.
Yeah, spawned it.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying is I think if Spawn's coming back, it's going to be that issue 301. Once he hits 300, once he hits 301, let's see what he does.
Well, I hope he hits 301 and goes, okay, guys, we're going to release number one and do a big number one. I think he's going to get a movie. I think, you know, when this all set, I think Spawn's going to get a movie because the technology is there. And if they pull off Deadpool, and if they do an X-Force movie with Cable, that 90s nostalgia is going to be at an all-time high. And there's no reason for Spawn not to have a movie.
Well, I think he did mention early 2015. So earlier this year, he did mention that a Spawn movie is in the works. But that could mean somebody's writing it right now.
Yeah, so I think that they can do it. I think superheroes is so mainstream, I think it needs it because he's dark. I think it fits today's taste, and I think it'll work.
And I think they can make it whatever they want.
Yeah.
That's the coolest thing about it, too.
He's been around so long, they can just do any rendition of him if they want.
And also, there's no expectations.
And people aren't as sensitive with it either, because it's not... People now aren't reading it like they used to, so it's not like, oh, that's not the Superman I grew up with. It's like, yeah, but that was 30 years ago.
This doesn't live up to the covers I see on the wall when I'm walking by.
So, Ryan, thank you for joining us, as always. I love talking 90s with you, kid.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime.
And sorry for the technical difficulties on the I don't know what they're doing outside here. They're doing something with the parking lot. And
they have a street sweeper that's just been going by. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Street sweeper.
Hey, it happens. But so for Dave, Ryan, I'm Corey. This is the Zapp Comics Radio Podcast. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you guys soon.
See you.
Peace out.
Zapp Comics Radio Podcast. Zapp